Hello! This is a video where I teach you how to do the timeline project that I've posted onto Teams. If the year is not 2021, then this project might be different and you might be watching the wrong video. I don't know. The first thing that you're going to need to do is figure out what you are going to be making your timeline on. Now, if you're doing pencil, paper, cardboard, construction paper, whatever, that's fine. That's a physical space. You don't need to worry about really this entire portion of the video. If you are planning on doing your timeline on something like PowerPoint or Sway, I've told you that the school division provides that for you for free. So you don't need to say, buy it. Don't buy it. The first thing you need to do to get it is to go to retsd.mb.ca or just Google River East Transcona School Division. This is your school division's homepage, and the thing that you're going to want to click on is right up in the corner, and then there it is, Office 365. That's all of the Microsoft Word Office suite at your disposal. Once you click on that, it's going to open up your Office 365 hub. You might need to log in before you do that. Your login information is the year that you graduate high school, followed by the first 5 letters of your last name, first letter of your first name, and then at retsdstudent.ca. So for example, if we were to make an account for me, mine would be 13DAIGNT at retsdstudent.ca. That's not my email. If you need to email me, you already know how. I'm already in your email books. Now, right here, we are at the hub. You have 2 choices. One, you can install Office onto your home computer. Feel free to do that. They are free, and they connect to your OneDrive, which is so useful. On this sidebar over here, you have access to Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Those are the 3 that I use most often, followed by Outlook, OneDrive, OneNote, Teams, and then down here is Sway. I'm going to start off with Sway and show you how to make a timeline in Sway, but if you want to make a timeline in PowerPoint instead, you just click PowerPoint. Once you click on the program that you want, say, for example, this is a Sway, this would be my PowerPoint hub. It'll offer you the option to make a new blank presentation or a bunch of other themed presentations. In Sway, it's a similar thing. You can make a new blank Sway. You can start from a document that you upload, or you can pick your own template. I'm going to start from a new blank Sway. I'm doing this all in my web browser, which right now is Chrome. It should work in pretty much every web browser unless you're running Netscape or Internet Explorer because your computer is from 2002. Okay, so we have Sway open. The first thing that we need to do is we need to title our Sway presentation. Timeline. I would encourage you, if you are making a timeline, to consider what question it is you are asking or trying to answer. Like maybe you are interested in how Ukraine becomes an independent state from Russia, or maybe you're just wondering how Russia is able to annex Crimea. This is a question that has an answer, and the answer is rooted in the historical timeline and relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Maybe you are interested in how human beings around the world started to build cities. Name your presentation after the question that you're asking. I think that the question that I'm going to ask is going to be very specific. My question is going to be about when did slavery in North America end? So that's going to involve me doing a lot of research about laws. It's probably going to involve a little bit of research about some military events. I think that a lot of this is going to be looking at maybe too big of a scope. Maybe North America is too big of a place to look because there's a bunch of different countries in North America that all have different histories. And I'm going to feel that out as I go along. But I'm going to start off with naming my timeline. Timeline of slavery. I'm not interested in like the timeline of slavery. I'm interested in the timeline of the end of slavery, which is emancipation. So my presentation is called, or my Sway is called, The Timeline of Emancipation in North America. Yours doesn't need to have $10 words like emancipation in it. They can if you want. so long as you are telling me exactly what it is that this timeline is supposed to show me. So if yours is the timeline of the rise of farming villages in the Indus Valley, great. If you're giving me a presentation on the military history of Germany, wonderful. My interest is that you are showing me a timeline of a place in the world. Whatever it is you choose, name your presentation after it. I'm going to tell you, don't worry about backgrounds for now. The last thing that you should be doing after you have gotten all of your information is making your timeline look pretty. But for now, I'm more interested in you having a correct timeline with meaningful details and historically significant events than I am in you having cool pictures. So, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a heading. So, the heading is going to be either the first event that happens or the most recent event that happens on my timeline. I can go in chronological order, either forwards or backwards, but I cannot have all of these events jumbled up. Don't do that. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of movie magic, and you're going to come back and you're going to see all of my dates are already filled out. Or whatever sound effect that transition deserved. So you'll notice a few things have changed. 1, Mr. Bones is no longer behind me because I've closed my curtain. 2, I'm wearing a hoodie. And 3, I have a timeline. I started off with the question, when did slavery end in North America? And I built a 15-piece timeline based on research that I conducted over the course of about 3 hours. That's the length of 3 classes of social studies. My timeline includes the heading, which includes the date, followed by a short description of it. In roughly 4000 BCE, we see the rise of civilization. We've talked about civilization in class as a loaded term that involves sort of othering people who are outside of city walls, but it's also tied to the rise of agriculture. And that is, when people are hunter-gatherers and form hunter-gatherer societies, it doesn't make sense to try and enslave people because then they just become another mouth to feed. But once you have an agrarian society, you usually also have forms of currency. Rather than gift economies, where everyone is just responsible for taking care of each other, you introduce the idea of resource wealth. In agrarian societies, slavery becomes a method to produce more food for farmers to generate profit. And then what I've done is I've taken my source. I'm using a quote from my source. We have to use our own words in these write-ups, but we are allowed to use the words of somebody else if we introduce them and properly cite them. So in this case, I went to historyworld.net, and HistoryWorld writes that on a large farm or in the workshop, there is real benefit in reliable source of cheap labor, costing no more than the minimum of food and lodging. These are conditions for slavery. Every ancient civilization uses slaves. And then I include my source, and I should actually write down the word source, and I include where I got that quote from. I don't always include a quote, but I am always using the information that I found on different websites. And so if, say, I jump forward to the way that Mayan slavery operates, which is my next slide, or jump all the way up to Columbus when he lands in the Caribbean, I need to make sure that I'm citing my sources for each of them. On this slide, I have a very good write-up, which says when Christopher Columbus arrived in the Bahamas, he saw that the indigenous tribes were friendly and willing to share their resources. He wrote to the King of Spain a letter explaining that he would enslave the people to have them mine for gold and then to have them produce cane sugar for Spain. But I don't get any marks for this because there is no source. Don't be like my third slide. Make sure you include your source. We'll notice that I've gone forward in time. So I started 6,000 years ago in the year 4000 BCE. That was a rough estimate because there is no exact time, exact date that I could find. And then I worked my way forward. When a date is unclear, you can use the little tilde, which is this little squiggly guy, to say roughly. I made sure to say BCE because this is before the Common Era. and then I said CE, and then after I say CE once, it's assumed that it is CE forever, so I don't need to continue using it. But if I should make a decision to either consistently use it or consistently not use it. So when I do my edits, I would go over and add those in. Everything that I have here is tied to each other. In 1629, there's the appearance of the first black slave in New France. He's a 6-year-old boy. And then 3 slides later, African slaves are legalized in New France. That means that that boy was there before slavery was allowed in New France legally. And so in that slide, I say that he was there without any actual laws governing New France because there weren't any laws about slavery in New France until there were. On these slides, we have the appearance of the first person who was indentured into service for life in the United States. He was a black man who tried to escape with 2 other white indentured servants. Indentured servants had a time limit to the time that they were tied to, where they were forced to serve a master. The 2 white men were given more time on their sentence, but John Punch, who was the black indentured servant who escaped and was recaptured, was sentenced to service for life, opening the doors for slavery in the United States. As a response to slavery becoming much more common in the United States, a group of religious Christians called Quakers drafted a resolution to stand against slavery and to refuse the use of slave labor. So I'm trying to capture both the laws that allow for slavery and the events that allow for slavery in places throughout North America, and then also the people who are working against it. I'm going to move forward to slide number 10 on mine, which I think is really interesting. In 1791, in the Caribbean, there is an island called Haiti, and Haiti had a 13-year revolution starting in 1791, where they forced the colonial government to abolish slavery, quote, forever. But then Napoleon of France came in and said, no, you don't, reinstated slavery, and so Haiti revolted and overthrew the French government entirely, took over, and on their first day as a government in their constitution, they became the first and only country in the world to abolish slavery in all forms. Then 2 years later, Britain started to limit slavery throughout the colonies and eventually abolished it. Haiti was France's biggest source of wealth because France was using Haiti for a lot of resources and they were paying the slaves no money. Because of that revolution, France took a huge hit financially, and Britain, seeing that that was a possibility in the colonies, started to respond. These are all connected. Now, eventually, slavery becomes illegal in all British colonies, and then immediately after, they start bringing in indentured servants from South Asia, mostly, to serve all around the British colonies in the place of the slaves who were refusing to work for their former masters who wanted to pay them virtually nothing. In the United States, a civil war happens, and then President Abraham Lincoln signs what's called the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing slaves from the Union territories, and then 2 years later amends the United States Constitution at the end of the war. So the United States Constitution now says, and it still says to this day, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereas the party has been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. This means that slavery is illegal in the United States except in prisons or when somebody is convicted of a crime, in which case involuntary service and slavery could legally be an action taken against them. And that's the end of my presentation, because the answer to my question, when was slavery abolished in North America, ended with the United States almost abolishing slavery in all forms. My presentation doesn't look particularly nice like this, but that's because I have to hit the play button. When I hit the play button, I'm going to be able to see a website generated based on the headings and text that I've included. I can play around with this. There are a bunch of other features, but so long as you have something like this, you have completed the assignment. You need to give me 10 to 15 events in your timeline that are related and historically significant. I look forward to reading your timelines. Thanks for watching. I know you had to.